Savannah Hayes thought her life was over the day the foreclosure notice arrived. Her family's ranch, generations of blood, sweat, and tears, was about to be lost forever. Her only hope? A chilling proposal from Weston Maddox, the ruthless oil tycoon, a man whose cold reputation preceded him. He wanted a wife, and she needed a savior. Their marriage was a contract, a calculated risk with no room for love, no promises, just a grim exchange. But Weston Maddox had no idea that the quiet ranch girl was about to ignite a fire he never expected, challenging his icy heart and forcing him to confront secrets buried deep within his past. Could a business deal truly become a scorching love? Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The Texas sun, a relentless golden eye in the vast blue sky, beat down on the parched land, baking the earth until it cracked like an old painting. For Savannah Hayes, that oppressive heat mirrored the suffocating weight in her chest. The foreclosure notice, stark white against the worn wood of the kitchen table, seemed to mock the faded photographs of generations of Hayes ranchers, their faces weathered but proud. The ranch, her family's legacy, their very soul, was dying. Slowly but surely, suffocated by debt, dwindling cattle prices, and a crippling drought. Savannah ran a calloused hand over the paper, its sharp edges a physical manifestation of her despair. Her father, a man whose spirit was as vast as the Texas sky, had fought valiantly, but even his legendary resilience had buckled under the relentless economic pressure. Her mother, usually a vibrant force of nature, moved through the old farmhouse like a shadow, her laughter replaced by quiet sighs. Savannah, with her practical braids and sun-kissed skin, had tried everything, selling homemade jams at the local market, offering riding lessons, even attempting to breed a new line of drought-resistant cattle. But it was a losing battle. The bank, cold and unfeeling, wanted their money. Then, the unthinkable happened. A sleek, black limousine, an anomaly in their dusty rural world, pulled up the long gravel driveway, kicking up a plume of white dust. Savannah watched from the porch, her hand instinctively going to the worn wooden railing. The driver, impeccably dressed, emerged first, opening the back door with an almost theatrical flourish. And out stepped Weston Maddox. Even from a distance, Weston Maddox was an imposing figure. Tall, with broad shoulders that filled out his tailored suit, he moved with an effortless grace that belied his formidable reputation. His dark hair was slicked back, his jawline sharp. His gaze, even from across the yard, seemed to pierce through the shimmering heat haze. He was the oil tycoon, a man whose name was whispered with a mixture of awe and fear across the state. His empire was vast, built on ruthless deals and an almost preternatural ability to acquire struggling assets, often leaving a trail of broken dreams in his wake. He was known for his colder heart, a man who saw the world in terms of profit and loss, devoid of sentiment. He approached the house, his polished shoes crunching on the gravel, each step a deliberate, powerful statement. Savannah felt a tremor of apprehension, a premonition of change, both terrifying and potentially salvific. Her father, sensing the gravity of the visit, stepped out onto the porch, his usual weathered smile replaced by a grim line. "Mr. Maddox," her father said, his voice laced with caution. Weston Maddox offered no preamble, no polite pleasantries. His voice was deep, resonant, cutting directly to the chase. "Mr. Hayes, I understand your ranch is facing foreclosure. I'm here with a proposition." His eyes, the color of storm clouds, swept over the dilapidated but proud homestead, then settled on Savannah, a flicker of something unreadable in their depths. Savannah felt his gaze like a physical touch, cold and assessing. She straightened her shoulders, meeting his stare with a defiant glint in her own determined blue eyes. She was a Hayes, And, even on the brink of ruin, they would not cower. Weston Maddox's proposal was as direct as his demeanor, and it hit Savannah like a punch to the gut. He wouldn't buy the ranch outright, nor would he simply lend them money. No, his terms were far more personal, far more shocking. "I am looking for a wife," he stated, his voice devoid of emotion, as if discussing a business acquisition. "A suitable partner, someone who understands commitment, discretion, and is willing to enter a mutually beneficial arrangement." His gaze, sharp and unwavering, returned to Savannah. "You fit the profile, Miss Hayes. Your family needs capital. I require a wife for social and business purposes, a marriage contract, a purely transactional agreement. Your family's ranch debt will be cleared. In return, you will become Mrs. Weston Maddox." Savannah's breath hitched. Marry him? This cold, ruthless stranger? Give up her freedom, her dreams of a life rooted in the land she loved, all for a piece of paper, a business deal? Her heart screamed in protest. She envisioned a quiet life, perhaps marrying a local rancher, raising children who understood the scent of hay and the rhythm of the seasons. This was a nightmare. But then, she looked at her father's haggard face, her mother's weary eyes, the proud, defiant lines of their ranch. This wasn't just her future at stake. It was their past, their present, their very survival. She was their last hope. The silence stretched, heavy with the weight of her decision. The Texas sun seemed to intensify, burning into her skin. Weston Maddox stood impassively, his expression unreadable, waiting, and predator sensing his prey's desperation. Savannah took a deep breath, the scent of dusty earth filling her lungs. She looked at the man who held her family's fate in his hands, this cruel Texas tycoon. Her heart pounded, a frantic drumbeat of fear and a burgeoning, unfamiliar resolve. She would do it. For her family. For the ranch. She would step into this cold, loveless contract. But she would not be broken. She would not be a quiet trophy wife. She would fight, even in marriage, for her spirit, for her soul, and perhaps for a glimmer of hope in a future that promised only cold calculations. What began as a desperate bargain was about to ignite a fire in a heart that thought it was beyond warmth, and in a man who had no idea what kind of strength he was about to unleash. The days leading up to the wedding were a surreal blur, a stark contrast to the slow, measured pace of ranch life. Savannah felt like she was trapped in a dream, or perhaps a particularly vivid nightmare. The sprawling, elegant offices of Weston Maddox's legal team, located in a gleaming skyscraper in downtown Dallas, were a world away from the dusty fields of her home. The air hummed with hushed conversations and the rustle of legal documents, each word a binding chain tightening around her future. The marriage contract itself was a cold, clinical document, devoid of any mention of love or affection. It meticulously outlined the financial arrangements, the immediate clearing of her family's ranch debt, a generous allowance for her, and provisions for her family's continued well-being. In return, she was to be Weston Maddox's wife, a public figurehead, attending social events, hosting dinners, and maintaining a dignified, unimpeachable facade. There were clauses about discretion, about public image, about the absolute lack of expectation for emotional connection. It was a business transaction, pure and simple, laid bare in excruciating legal detail. Weston Maddox himself remained an enigma. He was present during these meetings, a silent, imposing figure who rarely spoke, but whose gaze missed nothing. He observed her with an unnerving intensity, as if she were a complex equation he was trying to solve. His features were sharp, chiseled, his eyes the color of a stormy sky, revealing nothing of his thoughts. He exuded an aura of immense power and controlled detachment that was both intimidating and strangely compelling. Savannah found herself studying him too, trying to find a crack in his impenetrable facade. a glimpse of the man behind the ruthless tycoon. She found none. Her family, heartbroken but understanding, rallied around her. Her mother wept quiet tears, her father's hand resting heavily on her shoulder, his eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and gratitude. They knew the sacrifice she was making, the profound cost to her own spirit. "You don't have to do this, honey," her father had whispered, his voice thick with emotion. But Savannah had only shaken her head. Her resolve hardened. "It's done, Pa. The ranch needs me. You need me." The wedding itself was a private affair, held at Weston's sprawling, impersonal estate on the outskirts of Dallas. It was a place of cold marble, polished chrome, and vast empty spaces that echoed with a stark, sterile opulence. There were no joyful guests, no heartfelt toasts, no celebration. Only a handful of Weston's silent, watchful associates and her own tearful parents bore witness to the grim exchange of vows. Savannah wore a simple white dress, chosen by Weston's assistant, elegant but unadorned. She felt like a mannequin, a piece of artifice in a carefully staged tableau. As she walked down the aisle, her heart a leaden weight in her chest, she focused on her parents' faces, on the distant image of the ranch, clinging to the reason for her sacrifice. Weston stood waiting, his expression unreadable, his dark eyes meeting hers for a fleeting moment. His hand, when it took hers, was cool, firm, and devoid of any warmth. The words of the ceremony were a drone, a meaningless formality. "I do," they both murmured, their voices flat, empty of true emotion. The ring, a simple diamond band, felt cold and heavy on her finger, a symbol not of love, but of a binding, unbreakable contract. The brief reception was equally sterile. Polite, hushed conversations. A quick, obligatory toast. Savannah felt like an alien in her own life, a stranger in her own skin. She watched Weston, moving through the small gathering with an easy, practiced charm that was both fascinating and chilling. He was a master of control, his emotions locked away, his interactions calculated. As the evening wore on and the few guests departed, a profound silence descended upon the vast mansion. Savannah found herself alone with Weston in the sprawling living room, the city lights twinkling in the distance like indifferent stars. The reality of her new life, her new prison, settled over her with a crushing weight. "My assistant will show you to your room," Weston stated, his voice flat, devoid of warmth. "We will maintain separate quarters. As per the contract, our marriage is one of convenience. There are no expectations of intimacy. You are free to pursue your own interests within reason and consistent with your role as my wife. Your allowance will be deposited weekly. I will inform you of any social engagements requiring your presence." His words, precise and emotionless, were a cold validation of her deepest fears. This was truly a contract, a barren arrangement. She was a silent partner, a trophy wife in all but name, her heart, her spirit, walled off behind an invisible barrier. She looked at him, truly looked at him, this man who now controlled her life, her destiny. His eyes were cold, unreadable, like polished granite. But even as the desolation threatened to consume her, a flicker of something defiant ignited deep within Savannah. "No love, no expectations," he had said. A business transaction. Fine. She would honor the contract, but she would not be a quiet trophy wife. She would not be invisible. She was Savannah Hayes, a ranch girl forged in Texas grit, and she would find a way to live, to thrive, even within the confines of this gilded cage. Her spirit, her passion, her very essence would not be extinguished. And Weston Maddox, the man who believed he had bought a compliant wife, was about to discover the true, unyielding strength of the woman he had married. The first few weeks of Savannah's marriage to Weston Maddox were a chilling tableau of gilded isolation. The Maddox estate, a sprawling mansion of cold marble and gleaming chrome, felt less like a home and more like a minimalist museum, vast and echoing. Her designated wing, impeccably furnished, offered no comfort. She was surrounded by luxury, yet felt utterly impoverished in spirit. The silence was deafening, broken only by the hushed movements of the unseen staff, or the distant clatter of Weston's helicopter taking off from the private helipad. Weston himself was a phantom presence. He was rarely home, consumed by his oil empire, his days filled with board meetings, international calls, and ruthless negotiations. When he was present, his interactions with Savannah were brief, formal, and strictly professional. He would inform her of upcoming social engagements, his voice devoid of warmth, his eyes distant. He was polite, even courteous, but always with an impermeable emotional wall between them. Savannah felt like a living ornament, a decorative piece in his meticulously curated life. She tried to fill the vast emptiness of her days. She explored the manicured grounds, a stark contrast to the untamed wildness of her ranch. She visited the local library, devouring books on everything from sustainable agriculture to astrophysics, seeking knowledge to stave off the suffocating boredom. She even tried to engage with the staff, but they were as reserved as their employer, their responses polite but distant, clearly adhering to an unspoken code of non-interference. Savannah missed the ranch with an aching intensity. The scent of dry earth after a summer rain, the rough texture of a horse's mane beneath her fingers, the easy camaraderie of the ranch hands, the quiet wisdom of her father. She missed the purposeful rhythm of hard work, the tangible results of her efforts. Here, in this mansion, her existence felt meaningless, her purpose reduced to merely existing. But Savannah Hayes was not one to languish. Her Texas grit, forged in the crucible of hard labor and stubborn independence, refused to let her settle into complacent misery. She had promised herself she wouldn't be a quiet trophy wife, and she wouldn't break that promise. One morning, after another solitary breakfast, she found herself in Weston's immense home office, a place usually off-limits. He was in the middle of a heated conference call. His voice, usually calm, now sharp with frustration. He was facing a significant problem with a new drilling operation, a complex geological issue that threatened to shut down the entire project. He paced, running a hand through his dark hair, his brow furrowed in a rare display of exasperation. Savannah, initially intending to retrieve a forgotten book, lingered, her attention caught by the intricate geological maps spread across his massive desk. She had spent her entire life studying the land, observing its subtle shifts, understanding its hidden layers. Her ranch, though primarily cattle, sat atop layers of sedimentary rock, and she had absorbed a surprising amount of geological knowledge from her father and through personal interest. As Weston ended the call, slamming the phone down with a rare display of frustration, he noticed her. His eyes, usually unreadable, held a flicker of annoyance at her intrusion. "Is there something you need, Savannah?" he asked, his voice clipped. "I overheard," Savannah began, her voice calm despite her racing heart. "The geological issue with the new well. You're hitting a fall line, aren't you? Not a major one, but enough to destabilize the drill bore if not handled correctly, and the pressure differential could cause a serious blowout." Weston stared at her, his expression a mixture of shock and disbelief. How would you know that?" His tone was sharp, skeptical. "My father taught me to read the land," Savannah replied, her gaze meeting his, steady and confident. "My ranch is over a similar, smaller fault system. You need to angle your bore slightly, adjust your casing pressure by reducing the slurry density, and then use a specialized seismic imaging to map the microfractures before you proceed. It will cost you more time and money up front, but it will save you a catastrophic blowout and millions in cleanup. not to mention potential environmental penalties. End quote. Weston Maddox, a man who rarely showed emotion, simply stared at her, his storm cloud eyes wide with genuine surprise. He was accustomed to fawning sycophants and cunning rivals, not a ranch girl with an unexpected grasp of advanced geological engineering. His cold, calculating mind immediately recognized the precision of her observations, the logical solutions she offered. Her advice, casually given, was more astute than what his highly paid consultants had provided. A flicker of something unreadable, something akin to curiosity, crossed his face. He had bought a wife for convenience, a quiet figurehead. He had not bought a brilliant mind, a woman with a passion for the land that extended beyond cattle, a woman who dared to challenge his assumptions with unyielding confidence. "My geologists are stumped," Weston finally admitted, his voice low, a hint of grudging respect in his tone. "They proposed multiple solutions, none as clear or as cost-effective as what you just suggested." He walked to the desk, picked up a pen, and then looked at her again, a new intensity in his gaze. "Explain it to me again, in detail. Show me on the map." Savannah, a surge of adrenaline and a spark of defiance igniting within her, walked to the desk. She leaned over the map, her finger tracing the contours of the land, her voice clear and authoritative as she explained the geological complexities, the potential risks, and the precise solutions. For the first time since she had arrived at the Maddox estate, she felt truly alive, truly herself. She was not just a quiet trophy wife, she was a woman of knowledge, of strength, of fire. And Weston Maddox, the man who thought he had bought silence, was about to discover the unexpected depths of the woman he had married, a woman who refused to be invisible, a woman whose true strength was finally beginning to shine through the gilded cage. The incident in Weston's office, the unexpected display of Savannah's geological acumen, was a pivotal moment. It shattered the carefully constructed facade of their contractual marriage, exposing a crack in Weston's impenetrable armor of detachment. He had seen her not just as a silent partner in a business deal, but as a woman of intellect, of surprising depth, and undeniable strength. From that day forward, the nature of their interactions began to subtly shift. Weston, still distant, still reserved, no longer treated her as a mere ornament. He would occasionally seek her input on geological matters related to his oil operations, his questions precise, his gaze less assessing and more genuinely curious. He listened intently to her answers, his sharp mind absorbing her unconventional but highly effective perspectives. Savannah, for her part, met his gaze with a newfound confidence, no longer fearing his coldness, but embracing the opportunity to use her knowledge, to reclaim a sense of purpose. Their conversation slowly broadened beyond oil. He discovered her passion for sustainable ranching, her innovative ideas for drought management, and her deep respect for the land. He, in turn, found himself explaining the intricacies of the global energy market, the ruthless world of corporate acquisitions, and the immense power he wielded. It was an odd, unexpected intellectual dance between a ranch girl and an oil tycoon, two worlds colliding, finding common ground in their shared determination and shrewd understanding of their respective domains. The vast, silent mansion still felt cold, but Savannah began to subtly infuse it with her own presence. She started spending more time in the expansive, neglected gardens, coaxing life from the parched earth, planting drought-resistant native species, bringing bursts of vibrant color to the sterile landscape. The staff, initially wary, slowly warmed to her quiet resilience, their polite distance softening into genuine respect. She wasn't just the boss's wife. She was a woman who wasn't afraid to get her hands dirty, who spoke to them with genuine kindness, and who brought a subtle warmth to the cold, echoing halls. Weston noticed these changes. He would sometimes find her in the garden, her face smudged with dirt, her eyes sparkling with a quiet satisfaction as she nurtured a new rose bush. He would watch her from a distance, a flicker of something he couldn't quite name crossing his features. He saw her engaging with his staff, her easy laughter a stark contrast to the mansion's usual hushed tones. He had married a contract, but he was slowly discovering a woman, vibrant and alive, who was subtly, yet irrevocably, transforming his world. One evening, during a rare shared dinner, Weston found himself asking her about her ranch, not out of obligation, but out of genuine interest. Savannah spoke of the Hayes legacy, the struggles, the deep connection to the land, her voice filled with a passion that lit up her eyes. She spoke of her father's wisdom, her mother's strength, and the community that had shaped her. "It sounds like a very different world from mine," Weston mused, his voice uncharacteristically reflective. Simple, grounded, less complicated. A shadow, brief and fleeting, crossed his eyes. A glimpse of something darker, a distant memory that tightened his jaw. Savannah sensed the subtle shift, the momentary vulnerability. "Complicated isn't always better, Weston," she replied softly, her gaze steady. "Sometimes the simplest things hold the most value and the most strength." He looked at her, truly looked at her, and for the first time, Savannah saw a flicker of something beyond detachment in his storm cloud eyes. A hint of loneliness, a trace of regret, perhaps even a nascent curiosity about a life he had never known. Their conversations also began to veer into more personal territory, albeit cautiously. Savannah, still grappling with the weight of her sacrifice, felt a profound emptiness at the lack of emotional connection in their marriage. She knew it was part of the contract, but her heart, stubbornly resilient, yearned for something more. "You're always so guarded, Weston," she ventured one evening, her voice soft but direct. "Always so in control. Does it ever get exhausting?" Weston stiffened, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Control is necessary, Savannah. In my world, emotion is a weakness. It makes you vulnerable. It leads to mistakes, and mistakes cost fortunes and lives." His voice was flat, but there was an underlying tension, a tremor of something deeply ingrained. "Perhaps," Savannah conceded, "but sometimes vulnerability can be a strength too. It allows you to connect, to trust, to truly live, Weston, not just exist." He stared at her, his expression unreadable. Her words, so simple, yet so profound, seemed to strike a chord, touching a wound he had kept meticulously hidden. He turned away, his shoulders stiff, dismissing the conversation. But Savannah knew she had touched something, pierced a tiny crack in his formidable armor. Later that week, a crisis erupted in Weston's empire. A hostile takeover attempt, orchestrated by a rival conglomerate, threatened to destabilize his largest oil holdings. The stakes were immense, the pressure suffocating. Weston worked relentlessly, his face grim, his movements tense. Savannah, observing him, saw the toll it took, the silent strain beneath his unyielding facade. Instinctively, she began to help. She organized his chaotic paperwork, sorted through financial reports, and even offered her geological insights on the rival company's own assets, identifying potential vulnerabilities he hadn't considered. She didn't seek his permission, she simply acted, her determination and efficiency a silent force. Weston, initially surprised, then simply allowed her. He saw her working tirelessly by his side, her focus unwavering, her support unasked for, but invaluable. She was not just a wife, she was a partner, a formidable ally in the brutal world of corporate warfare. One night, as they worked late in his office, the air thick with tension, he paused, looking at her, truly seeing her. The Texas ranch girl, with her quiet strength and fiery spirit, was not just helping him save his empire, she was slowly, irrevocably, breaking down the walls around his heart. The business transaction was igniting, not into a roaring blaze, but into a slow, scorching warmth, a terrifyingly beautiful realization that a marriage of convenience was evolving into something far more profound, something he had never expected, and perhaps never wanted. A love that demanded vulnerability, a trust he hadn't known he was capable of, and a confrontation with the very demons of his past that had shaped his colder heart. The hostile takeover attempt, a ruthless corporate battle that stretched for weeks, became the crucible in which Weston and Savannah's relationship was truly forged. She worked tirelessly by his side, her scientific mind dissecting complex financial reports, her natural intuition for strategy surprising even Weston's seasoned advisors. Savannah wasn't just offering suggestions, she was actively participating, her insights proving crucial in several pivotal moments that turned the tide in his favor. Weston watched her during these intense periods. He saw her unwavering focus, her fierce dedication, her ability to remain calm and analytical under immense pressure. He saw her intelligence, sharp and unyielding, a perfect counterpoint to his own calculating brilliance. She wasn't just a partner, she was a formidable force, a woman who brought unexpected strength to his side. The casual respect he had developed for her blossomed into a deep, grudging admiration, and then, slowly, into something far more profound. The moments of shared victory, even small ones, subtly chipped away at his formidable emotional walls. A brief, shared glance of triumph, a quiet word of encouragement, a rare, tired smile from Weston that Savannah found herself cherishing. He began to see her not as a transaction, but as an essential part of his life, a presence that brought not just competence, but an unexpected sense of calm and clarity to his chaotic world. After a particularly brutal day of negotiations, when a crucial deal had finally tipped in their favor, Weston found himself alone with Savannah in his office, the city lights twinkling outside. The tension in the room, previously palpable, had finally dissipated. He looked at her, her face smudged with exhaustion but glowing with a quiet satisfaction. "We did it," he murmured, his voice rough with fatigue but tinged with a rare warmth. "We beat them." Savannah nodded, leaning back in her chair, a sigh escaping her. "It was close. But you're a brilliant strategist, Weston. You always find the angle." He walked towards her, and for the first time, he reached out, not in a formal gesture, but with a tentative tenderness, brushing a strand of hair from her tired face. His touch, though light, sent a jolt through Savannah, a surprising warmth that spread through her veins. His eyes, usually cold and unreadable, held a depth she had never seen before, a flicker of something vulnerable, something almost akin to affection. "And you, Savannah," he said, his voice low, "you are indispensable. You saw things my own people missed. You fought with me, not just for me. You are remarkable." His words, simple yet heartfelt, were a dam breaking. Savannah's eyes welled with tears, tears not of sorrow, but of a profound, unexpected relief. This was the first time he had truly acknowledged her, truly seen her, beyond the confines of their contract. She reached out, her hand covering his on her cheek, and for a fleeting moment their connection was raw, undeniable, and deeply emotional. But then, as quickly as it appeared, the vulnerability in Weston's eyes hardened, replaced by a familiar mask of detachment. He withdrew his hand, his shoulders stiffening, as if the sudden intimacy had frightened him. "Get some rest, Savannah," he said, his voice clipped once more, the emotional wall slamming back into place. "We still have loose ends to tie up." Savannah's heart ached with the sudden withdrawal, the abrupt return to their cold reality. Yet, the brief moment of connection, the glimpse into his deeper emotions, gave her a flicker of hope. She knew he felt something, even if he was terrified to show it. As the corporate battle wound down, Weston began to spend more time at the mansion. He would often find Savannah in the gardens, now flourishing under her dedicated care. He would watch her, a quiet observer, his gaze lingering on her hands, capable of both delicate cultivation and sharp analysis. He started to invite her on short business trips, not just for appearances, but for her insights, her calming presence, her quiet strength. During one such trip, to inspect a new drilling site in West Texas, they drove through vast, empty landscapes that reminded Savannah of home. Weston, usually engrossed in his phone, found himself looking out the window, a thoughtful expression on his face. "My father," he began, his voice surprisingly soft. "He was a rough man, a self-made tycoon, much like myself, but without the polish." A bitter laugh escaped him. "He believed in ruthless efficiency. Emotions were a weakness. Trust was a liability. He taught me to be strong, to be merciless, to never show vulnerability." A shadow, dark and heavy, fell over his features. He believed love was a distraction, a trap. Savannah listened, her heart aching for the young man he must have been, shaped by such a brutal philosophy. This was a rare, raw glimpse into the demons of his past, the source of his colder heart. She sensed the deep wounds, the ingrained fears that dictated his every interaction, his every emotional barrier. "And do you believe that, Weston?" Savannah asked, her voice gentle, daring to probe the depths of his carefully constructed world. "That love is a distraction? A trap?" He turned to her, his storm cloud eyes filled with a profound conflict. He wanted to deny it, to dismiss her words, to retreat behind his impenetrable wall. But her gaze, so open, so unwavering, held him. He saw the genuine concern in her eyes, the undeniable warmth that radiated from her, chipping away at the icy fortress around his heart. I don't know, Savannah," he finally admitted, his voice barely a whisper, a stark admission of his own profound uncertainty. The words hung in the air between them, a fragile, terrifying truth. What began as a cold contract was slowly, irrevocably, igniting into a scorching love, demanding a vulnerability he had never known. But could Weston Maddox, the man shaped by a lifetime of ruthless survival and emotional suppression, truly trust enough to let Savannah all the way into his carefully guarded heart? The answer would determine not only their future, but the very definition of love itself. Weston's reluctant confession, "I don't know," hung in the air of the luxurious car, a crack in his carefully constructed facade. Savannah felt a surge of hope, fragile but potent. It wasn't a declaration of love, but it was an admission of uncertainty, a sign that her presence, her unwavering strength, and her quiet empathy were indeed challenging the deeply ingrained beliefs that had shaped his colder Sabalai heart. He was beginning to question the very foundation of his life, a life built on control and emotional detachment. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance of cautious intimacy. Weston, still guarded, began to seek Savannah out more frequently. He would join her in the flourishing gardens, observing her work, sometimes even offering a tentative hand to help, his powerful fingers surprisingly gentle as he pruned a rose or tilled the soil. They would discuss not just business, but life, philosophy, the complexities of human nature. Savannah discovered a keen intellect beneath his ruthless exterior, a dry wit, and a surprisingly profound appreciation for the subtle beauties of the world he rarely allowed himself to see. She, in turn, learned more about his past, not through direct confessions, but through subtle hints, fleeting shadows in his eyes, the way he flinched at certain memories. She pieced together a picture of a lonely childhood, a demanding, unloving father, and a deep-seated fear of betrayal. He had learned early on that trust was a liability, that self-reliance was the only true strength. His ruthlessness, she realized, was a shield, a defense mechanism against a world that had taught him only to expect pain and disappointment. Savannah continued to challenge him, gently but persistently. She pushed him to acknowledge his emotions, to confront his fears, to see vulnerability not as a weakness, but as a path to true connection. She spoke of the strength found in honest relationships, in shared burdens, in the courage to let go of control. He resisted, of course, retreating behind his usual stoicism, but each conversation left a lingering impression, a new crack in his emotional armor. Their physical interactions, once strictly professional, also began to subtly change. A lingering touch of his hand on her arm, a shared glance that held more than just polite acknowledgement, a warmth in his eyes that spoke volumes. One evening, after a particularly late night working on a new strategy for a complex acquisition, Savannah fell asleep in his office chair. Weston, instead of waking her, gently lifted her and carried her to her room, his movements tender, his gaze filled with a protective affection she rarely saw. He lingered by her bedside, watching her sleep, a soft, almost vulnerable expression on his face. Savannah woke with a sense of warmth, a lingering feeling of being cherished. Though she had no conscious memory of being carried, her body remembered the comfort, and her heart stirred with a profound, terrifying hope. Then, a new threat emerged, not from a rival corporation, but from within Weston's own company. His longtime chief operating officer, a man named Sterling Vance, whom Weston had considered a trusted ally, was exposed as having secretly collaborated with the Order of the Silver Blade, the same organization that had targeted Jenna's Ghost Wing unit. Vance had been systematically sabotaging Weston's environmental initiatives, diverting funds, and leaking sensitive corporate data, all to benefit the Order's shadowy agenda of destabilizing established powers. The betrayal was a brutal blow to Weston. It confirmed his deepest fears, shattering his meticulously constructed world of calculated control. Vance, a man he had trusted implicitly, had been systematically working against him, leveraging his own past vulnerabilities, his rigid adherence to logic and aversion to emotion, to manipulate him. The revelation sent Weston into a dark spiral of rage and self-doubt. His past, his father's cynical lessons about betrayal, resurfaced with brutal clarity. Savannah found him in his office, the room in disarray, papers scattered, his face a mask of cold fury and raw pain. He was pacing, his usual control completely fractured. "He played me," Weston growled, his voice guttural, laced with self-loathing. "Vance. He used my blind spots, my trust. My father was right. Trust is a weakness. Love is a distraction. They always betray you in the end." He turned to her, his eyes blazing with a wild, desperate despair. "Everyone leaves. Everyone betrays." Savannah's heart broke for him. She saw the deeply wounded man beneath the ruthless tycoon, the scared child who had learned to build walls to protect himself from a world that had repeatedly failed him. She walked towards him, her movements slow, deliberate, her eyes filled with unwavering empathy. "Weston," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Vance was a monster. His actions have nothing to do with you, or with trust, or with love." She reached for his hand, her touch gentle but insistent. "He chose to be cruel. You chose to be trusting. That is your strength, not your weakness." He flinched at her touch, recoiling as if burned, his fear of vulnerability overwhelming him. "Don't, Savannah. Don't touch me. Don't try to fix this. You don't understand." "I understand more than you think," Savannah replied, her voice unwavering. She had faced her own betrayals, her own moments of despair. "I understand what it feels like to lose everything, to feel abandoned, to feel like the world is against you." She stepped closer, her gaze piercing through his defenses. "But I also understand that strength isn't about building higher walls. It's about tearing them down. It's about allowing yourself to be seen, to be loved, to trust even when it terrifies you." She placed her hands on his face, her gaze holding his, clear and unyielding. You bought a wife, Weston, a contract. But somewhere along the way, we became something more. You started to see me, and I started to see you, the real you, beneath the armor, the man who truly cares, who feels deeply, even if he fights it. Her voice was a fierce whisper. Don't let his betrayal destroy what we're building. Don't let your past steal your future. Weston stared at her, his storm cloud eyes filled with a terrifying mix of rage, fear, and a burgeoning, overwhelming emotion he couldn't name. Her words, her touch, her unwavering belief in him were shattering the last vestiges of his defenses. The cold contract had ignited into a scorching love, demanding a vulnerability he had always feared, a trust he had always denied himself. The demons of his past roared, but Savannah's strength, her love, and her unyielding spirit were a force he could no longer resist. The time had come for him to choose, to succumb to his past, or to finally open his heart and let Savannah all the way in. The future of their fragile, yet powerful connection hung in the balance. Savannah's unwavering gaze, her gentle yet firm touch, held Weston captive in the storm of his own internal battle. Her words, "Don't let your past steal your future," resonated deeply, shattering the last fragments of his carefully constructed emotional barriers. He saw not just a wife he had bought, but a woman who truly understood him, who saw past the ruthless tycoon to the wounded man beneath. The raw, primal fear of betrayal, ingrained since childhood, warred with a burgeoning, overwhelming love for Savannah, a love that demanded the very vulnerability he had always fought against. His breathing ragged, Weston finally gave in. He leaned into her touch, his hands coming up to grip her wrists, holding on as if she were the only anchor in a suddenly turbulent sea. The cooled mask of control crumbled, revealing a raw, agonizing vulnerability. Tears, hot and unfamiliar, pricked his eyes. I can't," he choked out, his voice a guttural whisper, revealing the depth of his pain. "I don't know how, Savannah. My father, he taught me that feelings were weaknesses, that love made you soft, that everyone, eventually, leaves or betrays you." He squeezed her wrists, his grip tight, almost desperate. "My mother, she left. My first business partner, he stole everything. Vance, he was like a brother to me. He used my own lessons against me." Savannah's heart ached for him. She saw the little boy who had been abandoned, the young man who had been betrayed, the tycoon who had built an empire on a foundation of cynicism and distrust. She understood his fear, the logical defense mechanisms he had adopted to survive. But she also knew that true survival, true strength, lay in courageously confronting those fears, not succumbing to them. "I won't leave you, Weston," Savannah vowed, her voice fierce, her blue eyes unwavering as she looked into his storm cloud depths. "I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. I've faced loss. I know what it feels like to have your world shatter. But I also know that healing starts when you stop building walls and start reaching out." She pulled his hands from her wrists, her fingers intertwining with his, her touch a silent promise. She drew him closer, her arms wrapping around his stiff frame. He resisted for a moment, his body rigid, his instincts screaming for him to pull away, to regain control. But her warmth, her unwavering presence, was a powerful force he could no longer fight. Slowly, agonizingly, his rigid shoulders relaxed, and he sagged into her embrace, burying his face in her hair, his body trembling with the weight of decades of suppressed emotion. It was a moment of profound vulnerability, a raw unraveling of the ruthless tycoon, exposing the lonely, wounded man he truly was. Savannah held him, offering silent comfort, her own heart overflowing with a fierce tenderness, a protective love that transcended their contract, their past, their disparate worlds. Over the next few weeks, Weston embarked on a painful journey of self-reckoning. With Savannah's unwavering support, he began to confront the demons of his past, the lessons instilled by his father, the betrayals that had hardened his heart. He started therapy, a difficult and often agonizing process that Savannah encouraged. He learned to identify his emotional triggers, to understand the roots of his cynicism, to slowly, painstakingly, dismantle the walls he had built around himself. Savannah became his confidant, his anchor. He shared his fears, his insecurities, his moments of doubt. He spoke of his childhood, his ruthless rise to power, the constant pressure of a world that demanded absolute control. And Savannah listened, offering empathy, understanding, and quiet strength. She didn't try to fix him. She simply loved him, accepting him with all his flaws, all his vulnerabilities. Their relationship blossomed, transforming from a cold contract into a scorching love, fierce and undeniable. The physical intimacy, once a non-existent clause in their agreement, ignited with a passion that surprised and overwhelmed them both. It was born not just of desire, but of deep emotional connection, of trust hard-won, of two souls finally finding solace and passion in each other. Weston, once so detached, became possessive, not in a controlling way, but with a fierce protectiveness that spoke volumes of his newfound love. He cherished her, celebrated her strength, her intelligence, her unyielding spirit. He still worked relentlessly, but now his empire was no longer just about profit and power. It was about building a secure future for them, for their growing love. He introduced her to his closest, most trusted advisors, not just as his wife, but as his partner, his confidant, his equal. He relied on her insights, her intuition, her grounded perspective. He found that letting go of absolute control, of sharing his burdens, actually made him stronger, more resilient, and ultimately a better leader. One evening, as they sat in the thriving garden Savannah had cultivated, the air filled with the scent of jasmine and the soft hum of crickets, Weston turned to her, his storm-cloud eyes now warm, filled with a profound love that shone brighter than any Texas sun. "Savannah," he began, his voice deep, resonant with emotion. "Our marriage began as a contract, a cold calculation, but it has become everything. You have taught me what true strength is, not control, but courage, not detachment, but connection. You have shown me how to trust, how to love, and—" He reached for her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers, his touch no longer cold, but radiating warmth and devotion. "I love you, Savannah Hayes," he declared, the words, once so terrifying, now flowing freely, filled with a lifetime of suppressed emotion. "More than I ever thought possible. You are my fire, my strength, my heart." Savannah's eyes welled with tears, tears of pure, unadulterated joy. This was the man she had married, yes, but transformed. A man who had faced his demons, embraced vulnerability, and opened his heart to a love he once thought impossible. "I love you too, Weston Maddox," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Always." He pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that consumed them both, a scorching flame that had ignited from the ashes of a cold contract. What had begun as a desperate bargain to save a family ranch had blossomed into a love story of immense strength, profound healing, and undeniable passion. Savannah, the ranch girl who refused to be a quiet trophy wife, had not only saved her family, but had tamed a Texas tycoon, showing him that true strength lay not in a colder heart, but in the fiery courage to love, to trust, and to let someone, finally, all the way in. Their future, once uncertain, now stretched before them, a testament to the transformative power of a love that had defied all expectations and conquered all fears.